Here's the uncomfortable truth we tend to avoid until it's too late. Your photos, messages, notes, and accounts can die locked. Not deleted, not passed along, just sealed, perfectly preserved behind passwords no one else has, tied to a phone number that no longer answers. That's not drama, that's the default setting. When my grandson first mentioned something called a legacy contact, I nodded like I understood. I didn't. The phrase sounded like paperwork invented by lawyers to justify a lunch meeting. For most of our lives, inheritance meant more. A will, a folder, maybe a small metal key taped inside a drawer. You knew where things were because they were physical. You could point at them. That model quietly stopped working. Accounts now outlive us. Email doesn't expire. Photo libraries don't yellow with age. Social profiles don't close themselves. They just wait. And the systems holding them aren't designed to notice absence as a final condition. They assume delay. They assume you'll be back after you find the charger or reset the password. That's the shift worth paying attention. Not emotionally, logistically, a locked iPhone is no longer just a phone. It's the only copy of years of photos, conversations, saved documents, health data, and access to other services. A Gmail account isn't just email. It's the reset button for everything else. A Facebook account isn't nostalgia. It's a public record of relationships that keeps showing up in reminders long after no one can sign in. None of this was built with inheritance as the starting point. These platforms were built for continuity, for daily use, for the assumption that the owner is reachable and responsive. When that assumption breaks, the system doesn't gracefully hand things over. It freezes. That's where families end up stuck. Not because anyone did anything wrong, but because nobody named who gets access. Support tickets go nowhere. Password screenshots don't help. Guessing triggers security locks. And suddenly people are arguing over accounts instead of handling the actual situation in front of them. What makes this slightly absurd is that the fix already exists, buried in settings. Written in language that feels more like corporate risk management than plain English. Apple has a legacy contact feature. Google has something called Inactive Account Manager. Facebook lets you name a legacy contact too. These aren't new. They've just been quiet. Quiet enough that most people never turn them on. The real issue isn't complexity, it's timing. You're asked to make these choices while everything is fine, which makes it easy to postpone. Nothing feels urgent. The accounts work. The phone unlocks. The idea stays theoretical until it isn't. So the question isn't who deserves your passwords. That framing doesn't even fit anymore. The question is who you authorize the system to trust when you're no longer logging in. Who gets access without playing detective? Who can close accounts, retrieve what matters, and move on without a support marathon? Together, slowly, without panic. That's what we're decoding here, calmly, practically, with a small smile at how strange it is that this now counts as basic planning. Let's translate what actually happens when nobody planned this. Someone passes away, and suddenly there's an iPhone no one can unlock, a Gmail inbox no one can enter, and a Facebook account that keeps resurfacing in reminders like nothing changed at all. Support gets cold, screenshots of passwords get passed around, guessing starts, accounts freeze harder, tempers follow. None of this is rare or dramatic. It's the default outcome when digital access depends on habits instead of instructions, and systems treat absence as suspicious rather than final. What makes it slightly absurd is that the fix has been sitting there the whole time, buried in settings, written in language that sounds like it was approved by a legal department that doesn't own a phone or use these services daily. Apple calls it Legacy Contact. Google calls it Inactive Account Manager. Facebook also calls it Legacy Contact. Different names, same job. You name a person now so the system knows who to trust later, without improvisation or emotional negotiations. Start with Apple. Legacy Contact lives under your Apple ID settings. You pick a person, they get a special access key, and Apple handles verification when the time comes. This is not a password handoff. It's controlled access to data through Apple's process. The important part is choosing the right person and actually sending them the access key. If they don't have the key, the setting exists only in theory. Many people stop halfway and assume it worked. It didn't. Access depends on follow-through. Separate from that is Apple's Account Recovery Contact. This one helps while you're still alive but locked out. People mix these up constantly. Don't. One is for after. One is for when your phone is useless and you need help now. If you care about avoiding chaos, you set both. That's not paranoia, that's realism. Phones break. Passcodes get forgotten. Recovery needs a human the system already recognizes, not a support agent guessing intent from a ticket. Now Google, Inactive Account Manager, is the least inviting name for a very practical tool. You tell Google how long inactivity counts as a signal. You choose who gets notified and what data gets shared, or whether it gets deleted instead. The control is the point. You're not handing over your entire digital life. You're deciding in advance what happens instead of letting the system guess. That difference matters when timing is tight and patience is limited. Facebook's version is simpler. You name a legacy contact who can manage certain things on your profile, or you choose deletion. What you don't do is leave it untouched and hope people figure it out later. They won't. They'll argue instead. So the takeaway is simple and adult. Pick trusted people, set the contacts, send the keys, write down where it lives. 10 minutes now saves weeks later, not because anyone failed, but because systems don't read minds. They read settings. It helps to zoom out at the end, because nothing here is actually extreme. The web didn't turn cruel overnight. Systems didn't decide to punish anyone. They were built to keep moving, not to pause gracefully when someone disappears, unless instructions say otherwise. That's where the quiet frustration comes from. People assume there's a humane default baked in, something that notices context, something that understands loss. There isn't, there's configuration. Software does exactly what it's told, even when no one remembers giving instructions. Once that's clear, the emotional temperature drops. This stops being about guilt or foresight or who should have known better. It becomes a practical gap, a few boxes left unchecked, a few names never entered. Nothing moral attached to it at all. There's also a payoff that doesn't get enough attention. Setting this up isn't just about access, it's about dignity. Photos don't get trapped behind help desk tickets. Messages don't vanish because nobody could authenticate. Accounts don't linger like unresolved glitches. It reduces friction between people already under strain. No arguments over screenshots, no guessing passwords, no deciding in a charged moment what someone would have wanted. The system already knows because you told it clearly while things were calm. If this feels slightly absurd, that's fair. Modern adulthood includes learning where the actual levers are. We lived through dial-up tones, pop-up infestations, and software crashes. We adapted by finding the settings that mattered and ignoring the rest. This uses the same skill set: calm attention, reading past the headline, keeping proportion. 10 minutes of setup replaces weeks of cleanup. That's not drama, that's arithmetic, applied before the problem arrives instead of after everyone is tired. There's a broader posture underneath this. You don't need to chase every platform update. You don't need to optimize your digital life like a hobby. Walking alongside systems works better than sprinting ahead of them at every new feature. You let features mature before trusting them. You decide when they're allowed to matter. Convenience becomes useful instead of controlling. That's not resistance. It's judgment, exercised quietly, without needing to announce anything to anyone. That's what staying in control looks like now. Not nostalgia, not bravado, just clear boundaries and named people. Systems behave better when intent is explicit and written down instead of assumed during moments nobody planned for. One last thing said plainly, this isn't about preparing for death. It's about preparing for absence. Phones get lost, accounts lock, people get busy, systems keep charging and waiting. Clarity now prevents improvisation later. So the quiet conclusion is this: modern inheritance isn't sentimental, it's logistical. Logistics done calmly tend to look like wisdom in hindsight. We'll keep translating what changed, pointing to switches that matter, and ignoring the rest. That's old dog, new moves.